Hi there, Neil McGee with the UVA School of Data Science. In this webcast, I'd like to go over different ways to authenticate to GitHub and how to troubleshoot those different methods when you're getting a permission denied or you're suddenly getting a prompt for a username and password when you didn't think you should be, and so on. A couple different ways to sign in when you're using the command line and trying to push and pull to GitHub. So my basic case here is that I have a repository in GitHub. Things are fine, and I'd like to work with it on my laptop here. So the normal way I'd go about that is I click on the code button, click to local, and the HTTPS address. So it gives me this web URL, and I copy that. And then I go over to my command line, and I'm in a sandbox folder right now. And the normal method is I would say git clone URL. And at this point, I would like to inject, I'd like to put some data right here at the beginning of that URL. I'm going to put my username and a colon, and then an environment variable I have called GitHub token, my personal access token, which is actually this value right here. I have it in another tab, my GHP. And so what's going to happen is Bash is going to grab the value of that environment variable and sort of string replace it in the moment I run this command. So it'll inject that long value there. And this only happens in the moment I sort of execute this. And I'm going to just let it clone into a folder called demo. So that's great. So here we have it, into demo. So let's cd into demo. And we see there's some files. Let's change readme. I'll just erase a couple lines. Git status, good. Git add that, git commit that. And then I should be able to push just fine. Git push origin main. Great. So that's the normal use case. That's just how simple it should be. But let's go into the git config file. And you'll see here is that URL that got sort of dynamically created when I cloned. HTTPS in McGee, here's my token, at github.com, and so on. Now if I come down here and I just deliberately just mangle this, I'm just going to take out one character. I've just suddenly changed my authentication for this repository. And honestly, that line right there, this whole special line, has my authentication sort of baked into it. So anytime, if I change this, I've changed my ability to authenticate. It's sort of like messing up my password in a way. So now if I change my README file, demo site, git add, git commit, testing again, and I try to push this, I'll get this prompt that says support for password authentication was removed years ago. Authentication failed. It can't do anything. It gives me a URL to go and try things out. And so this is pretty confusing. Sometimes you'll get a prompt here that says, GitHub asks for your username and what's your password. And anytime you get the prompt for username and password on the command line, they mean your username and a personal access token and not your real GitHub password. So yeah, so that failed. So that's interesting. So one way I could fix this is I can once again edit that git config line. And I could go in here and manually, using Nano, I could manually paste in my PAT, and I would know that that K is missing at that point. Or let's say my PAT token expires once every year and I need to just update this. I can update it manually using Nano here, or I can use this special command. And here I have a website, Git in Data Science. I'll put the URL to this in the notes for this video. Git in Data Science, and if we go back, there's an advanced page, advanced Git. And there is this note, changing SSH to token authentication. This is a topic we'll touch in a minute, but there is this nice, handy command, git remote set URL. And this means we can sort of correct our URL if we'd like to within the command line. And so this is a sort of a command way of editing that config file. So I didn't want to execute that right away. Let's change that so that it is demo in the InMcGee account. So that's better. And now let's cat out the git config file. And we should see, once again, it's got my good working token with the K in front and so on. It doesn't have my username, but that's actually truly optional. It's really okay. And so if I were to test this right now, I should get just fine pushing and pulling abilities. So that's one thing. If you're having trouble, you've put your PAT in there, and and you're getting these prompt for username and password, or you're getting a permission denied, you might want to go check that file and make sure that your PAT is properly inserted in there. Sometimes people think that they've inserted the PAT, but when they look, it just says github.com, and all of this gobbledygook in here is missing. So that's the first thing. Check that. The second is, if you'd like an ultimate sort of fallback, is you can use SSH key authentication. And to do that, we cd into a hidden directory called, home directory /.ssh. And if that folder doesn't exist, you can make it. So let's just make one, for instance. I'm going to remove it, and here's the make command. I would say make dir SSH, and then I need to secure it because this holds keys 700. Those two will create the key, and then that will set the proper permissions. And this means that I have full control over that folder, but nobody else has any access to it whatsoever. And then let's cd into it. And what you'll see is it's an empty directory, but I can create a pair of keys here using a built-in command, ssh-keygen. This is going to generate a key pair. And a key pair is a private key and a public key. And cryptographically, they're meant to go together. They kind of complement each other mathematically, so to say. And so what happens is I'm going to take that public key and I'm going to give it to GitHub, and I'm going to keep the private key here locally on my laptop and never, ever share it with another soul. Let's just go ahead and run that and see what we get. So run the command. It suggests a location for it. I'm going to say that's fine. I don't want a passphrase with this key. You can actually lock it even further with a passphrase, and I don't want a passphrase again. And now it's been created, and it gives me a little some little art image that helps show the cryptography of this, the fingerprint, so to say. So there we have it. There's my private key and my public key. So let's look at the let's look at the private key. So I'm going to cat that out, and you'll see it's some long base64 encoded string. And if I look at the public key, it's actually all on one line, and it ends with an email address. I could actually change that email address if I want. It's kind of based on the laptop I'm using. And so what happens is I can take this public key and copy it, and then I shift over to my web browser and go to GitHub, and I click on my profile button, and I say, your profile. Oops, sorry, not profile, settings. We go to settings, and then down on the left it says SSH and GPG keys. And here I can create a new SSH key. I can add it. Demo key. And now I'll just paste it right here. So I'm adding my public SSH key. It's going to make me confirm this on my phone, which is fine. Number 83, good. Good, so that takes me through. And so now I have a different way that I could clone this or work with it. And that is that I can use SSH as an address. It's a different web protocol, a different way of having machines speak to one another. So let me copy that URL. And now I can go back to my repository, and basically I can go back to this command where I'm setting the URL, and I don't need my token at all anymore. Tokens are no longer even needed when I'm using SSH keys. What I'm going to do is say get remote set URL of origin, which is GitHub, to this interesting looking address. It's not a web address, it's git@github.com. So I changed that, and if I look at the git config file, I'll see this is completely different now. It's much shorter. There's no personal access token injected anywhere. My username is in there only as the path of the folder. But now I can change I'll take that word away here, git add, git commit, and so then I get this prompt, and this only happens once. When you've created a new key and you're trying to authenticate to GitHub using that key, it's saying, hey, the authenticity of this host, this is not something I've never seen before. Is this an authentic host that you trust? And so it's saying, hey, your key fingerprint is this. This would actually match what I got when I generated the key up above. Are you sure you want to connect? Yes or no? And you can go ahead the first time you connect and just say yes. And your system's going to remember this little nod of trust. And at this point, my commit just went up. So it worked. It authenticated just fine. And I can go here and I can see instead of 11 commits, I should have several more now, 14 commits. And there it is using an SSH key. So this is a different way of using SSH key pairs to authenticate back and forth to GitHub. Now, the nice thing about an SSH key is that it never expires. So it's great. The bad thing about an SSH key is it never expires. And you want to be good about rotating them every now and then. So I would suggest once a year, you actually delete the key and you create a new one, and you work with that. You add the public half to GitHub, and then you work with the new private half locally. And the nice thing is you never have to change anything in the repository. You know, this file right here never needs editing because there's no value here that ever expires. Whereas if you're using a personal access token, you do have to come every now and then, and you know, if you have a new PAT or one that's expired, you have to come in here and edit this file or use that set URL command, this remote set URL origin command. But this is a friendly command that'll help you kind of rewrite that line automatically so you don't have to use nano. Anyway, I hope this helps. And the ultimate fallback, if you ever have a problem in a repository, you go to code, and you're always welcome to use code spaces. And so you click on the code button, go to code spaces. It's going to open up an environment, and what you'll see is actually that GitHub, as they set this up for me, GitHub goes ahead and does all this sort of plumbing internally for me. And let's just take a peek at how they might do that. They actually generate a token for me that's hidden away in my profile. Like I can't even see it in my if I go down to developer settings and I go to my tokens, it's not even listed here. It's sort of a hidden token. But what I can see is that I'm in the root of a project. And if I cat out the config file, here is just the plain web address for my repository. But I can also, and this is really small, apologies for that, I can also see that GitHub has a little bit going on under the hood. If I spit out my environment and I grep for Git, then you'll see it knows my GitHub user. Here's my GitHub token that it's dynamically generated just for this one session. It knows about a code spaces, you know, all sorts of things, the repository itself. And so this is where all the kind of connectivity of authentication happens within a code space. But the nice thing is they do it for me. It's all set. And so code spaces, if you're ever having problems and you're just about to beat your head against the wall, you can always fall back to a code space where authentication is taken care of for you. You can work with your repo. You can git pull, git commit, git add, and all of that. Last thing I'll say about a code spaces is I have now generated a code space for this repository. So if I refresh this page and I come back, it's got this vigilant garbanzo. I love how they name these. It's created this, and this is going to last typically for 30 days. You know, if I leave this code space, I close it right now, it'll stay running, I think, for about another 30 minutes or so. They give me 60 hours for free every month of this thing running, but they'll shut it down if I'm not working with it just to save resources. But if I do see a code space that's already been created and I'm coming back into it, later today, or later tomorrow, or something like that, or next week, you do need to remember that it's a environment sort of stuck in a moment of time, and for that reason, you're going to want to say git pull origin main when you first start working, just so that it makes sure and pulls any new and recent changes in there to stay fresh. If I'm just creating a code space for the first time from this repository and nothing was here, then it's going to pull it for you. But if it already exists, you want to go ahead and do a pull again just to catch up and make sure it's all current. Okay, hope this helps. Thanks so much.